All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, and thank you for being here. So today we're going to be covering how to deploy and manage Agent Client Collector at scale. Now today's session is part of the ITOM Visibility and Governance webinar series, and we hope that you will join us for future topics throughout the year. Now today's session is also part of the Live on ServiceNow program, which is a curated set of events to connect you with ServiceNow experts and peers that can help you deploy ServiceNow products and achieve value faster. Now you can see the complete schedule by scanning the QR code or by using the link that we just placed in chat. So we hope that you can join us for another webinar meetup. And these cover any topic. So today we're focusing on ITOM. These Live on ServiceNow webinars will focus on just about every area that ServiceNow has. Now, just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So everyone's line is muted, so please use the Q&A feature to ask questions throughout today's session. Feel free to introduce yourself when you ask a question. We'd love to know who you are. Please participate in the polls. We're going to have 2 polls today, and it really just helps us understand where you are in your deployment journey. This session is being recorded and will be shared on ServiceNow community site, as well as on YouTube for future playback. And then after this webinar ends, you will be prompted to fill out a short survey. Your feedback is greatly appreciated to help us improve this for a future series. Now just a little bit about our presenters. So my name is Steve Emerson, and I'm the Outbound Product Manager for ITOM Visibility and Governance here at ServiceNow, and I will be your host for today's session. And as an outbound product manager, I wear many hats: product evangelist, customer value realization, as well as sales enablement, just to name a few. But what I love most about my role is that I get to meet with you and hear how you're using our products, and I get to share information about how our products can help you achieve value for your business. Now, I've been here at ServiceNow for 5.5 years, and I've been working across the ServiceNow ecosystem for 10 years as a customer, partner, and an employee. And I've spent the most of my career working in enterprise IT roles across a multitude of functions, so I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And our main presenter today is Severin. So Severin, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Severin. I'm the product manager for the Agent Client Collector, and I'm delighted to be your presenter for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Severin. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'll turn things over to you, Severin.
Thank you very much, Steve. So today is about a continuation of the webinar we gave, Steve and I, about 6 months ago, last summer, about the Agent Client Collector. We have tremendous adoption of the agent and for multiple use cases. And so just as a very quick refresher, the Agent Client Collector is a single agent that connects to your ServiceNow instance, and it will fulfill multiple use cases. We started a couple of years ago with ingesting events and metrics for item health use cases, AIOps. We expanded with an alternative to horizontal discovery for the system information. This is the discovery use case. We went further with application or software metering as part of software asset management use case. And we also delivered content for SecOps and ITSM use cases for better together stories. So all of this content is provided to you on ServiceNow platform using the store ServiceNow.com. And it all gets this data into our platform of platforms, ServiceNow, using a single data model, our CMDB, that has the CSDM on top of it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the simple architecture, it is one or set of agents that will connect to one or multiple MIT servers. The MIT servers will host a web server. So I repeat, it is the agents that initiate the TCP connection to connect to the MIT servers. And then the MIT servers will communicate that back to ServiceNow instance. The agent can be deployed on Linux, on Mac, and on Windows for both servers and end user compute devices. Next slide. Very likely your infrastructure is a bit more complex than what I was describing in the first slide. So think about how you want to design the architecture for using the agent. You may have a need for visibility on data center, on your virtualization platform, maybe on some cloud service accounts, office space, as well end user compute. And as you may have noticed, quite a few people over the past couple of years, more and more worked remotely, sometimes as part of a VPN and sometimes without VPN. So think about all of these use cases as you roll out the agent. Next slide.
All right, we've come to our first poll. We'd like to understand where you are in your agent client collector journey today. So please select all that apply. So the answers are here are, what is ACC? Maybe this is the first time that you're hearing about this. We are performing a proof of concept or POC. We are undergoing an ARB or security review, architecture review board that would be for those of you who do not know what that is. We are rolling out the agent in pilot or sub-production. And finally, we're using it in production. Let's just give it about 10 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. Still see a lot of answers coming in. Thank you very much. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So as we can see, we have a lot of you who are just seeing this for the first time. That's great. You'll get to learn a little bit more about how you can deploy and manage ACC today. The second most here are, there's a lot of you who are performing a proof of concept or a POC. That's great to hear. And then the rest are all pretty much equal. Some of you are undergoing an ARB security review. Some of you are rolling it out in sub-production. And finally, some of you are actually using it in production. So thank you. All right, Severin. Let's go on to the next slide here.
All right. So you are, for some of you, considering the agent as one of your sources of information for discovering those systems or additional use cases. Some of you are already in the preparation work to make it happen, and some of you are in production. So very happy to see that we have quite a large spectrum of profiles here in the audience. And even for those who are in production already, in your IT infrastructure, when you deploy a component, a piece of software, it normally comes with quite a few things there. Like we deploy the agent, well, you will need a made web server to be hosted in your IT infrastructure. As you spin up any web server in your IT environment, you have some security requirements to take into account. You have to consider things like TLS and digital certificates, load balancing, high availability, all of these things. Things get complex. That's why we still all have a job, right? So to be successful in your production rollout, which can happen with just a couple of days, a couple of weeks, I had with some customers, you must have this process where you engage the right people at the right time. And I wanted to make sure that on just one slide, you can visualize the kind of groups you need to reach out to so that you make the right decisions in the design and in the actual steps of your rollout. You will have to deploy the agent. Well, if you deploy it on a few systems, you can still do that manually using the wizard, click, click, click. It's great. But very quickly, you will need to package that agent into your deployment mechanism. And we'll get to that in a minute. So think about who you need to bring to be successful with a rollout. Next slide. And this rollout, you don't have just a single way to make it happen. There are many approaches. There are likely some of them that are better than others, but it depends on your environment. It depends on the scope. So some customers started with a proof of concept of proof of value. That's great. You may likely do that as potentially as a pre-sales activity, or for those who already have the licenses for that, you can do it on your own or with a partner. You may want later on to get into a more complex deep dive into the agent with the pilot phase, having that architecture review squared out to be successful, and then target a set of systems. It can be by region, or by data center, or by specific environment on some cloud service accounts in particular, or if you have a specific need. Let's say you do not have credential based discovery enabled in just one place, one segment of your network. You may want to start deploying the agent into these systems at first, so that you get the value of the agent immediately for your discovery requirements. What you don't want to do is to spin up the agent on 150,000 systems, only to realize that your heavily configured and customized instance is full of duplicate records. So let's make sure that you take a phased approach to make sure that everything is right as you deploy the agent. Next slide, please. Part of these POC and pilot phases, again, you want to take it one step at a time, but make the right decisions early on. So you want to understand how you're going to run the agent. If you run horizontal discovery already, you may have a user that is named ServiceNow. Well, that's the default user we use when we deploy the agent, when we install the agent. You may have a conflict here, potentially. So you have to make those decisions how to run the agent and how to position your mid servers to receive the agent connections. Next slide. All right. So I covered quite a lot in our first session before about those phases to deploy the agent. I realized that I didn't spend any time to actually present anything on my screen besides the slide deck. I'm very sorry about that, but let's call it a continuation of the first session. So automation. You have mainly three categories to automate the deployment of your agent. One of them is to bundle the agent in a package and distribute that package as a one-time action. It can be at the time the system right after it is provisioned, or it can be as part of normal run. And there are many solutions for that with, let's say, Red Hat Satellite for your Linux systems. You can use, many customers, they use SCCM or Tanium or BigFix, as well as Jarmuth, especially for Mac. You can have a SSH loop if you want to, if you are like me from 20 years ago. But many tools provide you these one-time commands in a way that gives you insights about what was done. So this is approach number one. Approach number two is to use a configuration management system that will actively enforce the state of your system, of its configuration files, of the services defined and running on those target systems. Maybe not at all times. Again, it can be on demand, but can be also set up on a schedule. And so for that, you have quite a few solutions like Puppet, Salt, Chef, Ansible, CF Engine, etc., etc. And the last piece is how you can handle those environments where you will prepare a master image or golden image with the agent most of the time, but then clone that instance. And as the cloned VM starts up, the agent will automatically connect to the mates and get registered. So you have many approaches here, as you can see, and they all have their own pros and cons. It depends on how your IT infrastructure teams handle those environments. Maybe they have one way to handle on-prem systems on data centers, and maybe they have another one to handle cloud images. It may not be the same team. You may have some business IT departments here and there where they may have different standards and solutions to maintain those environments. And of course, end-user compute, mostly its own thing on the side. So as you engage with this work on deploying the agent, make sure that you have the right people at the table to understand which approach they take to manage the systems at scale. Next slide. Let's get a bit deeper. There are many things you can configure on the agent. And think about what could potentially change over time. Sometimes we may add new features. It happens pretty much every quarter. Sometimes you may want to change a specific value because you made the decision to change it. So what do you do with the existing systems that have been deployed? It's not good enough to just think about the new systems. And you don't want to have to uninstall an agent and reinstall an agent every time. This can happen sometimes if you are already stuck in a very bad situation, but normally you should just be able to enforce the agent configuration, push it there, restart bounce the agent at worst, and let it run normally. So I mentioned on this slide a few items in the agent configuration that you may want to consider, but it's not just the agent. For example, on Windows, you have the Windows service, how you want to configure it. Quite a few customers started deploying the agent running with a default local user. And maybe now they want to move to local system or local service or a GMSA account. So think about how you can manage those things with the automation that you have in place available for you. On Linux, sudo. Sudo, in many companies, sudoers is not handled by you on ServiceNow admin, ServiceNow platform or CMDB admin. It is handled by the system administrators. They don't want you to touch sudoers files. So this is where you need to engage with them and see in which environments how can you have the very few commands that require privileged access. One thing to keep in mind is that the agent is configured initially with just the way it authenticates to the MIT servers by default with the API key. And just like our MIT servers, at first, the API key is not encrypted, it's in clear text. But as soon as the agent starts, it will encrypt it. It will encrypt it with a symmetrical key. That symmetrical key will be generated and stored inside that acc.yaml file. That key is not used at all for identifying the agent. It is not the agent ID that you have in your agent record on the CMDB. It is only to decrypt and encrypt, if needed, the API key or the password if you're using the HTTP authentication. Which means as soon as you have that key encrypted plus the associated symmetrical key, you can just bundle that into a single file and push it across all your systems. So think about your approach when you want to change that configuration file. Being cautious of time here, Steve, any question?
Yes, Severin. Actually, we do have a few questions. I think maybe we can get these out of the way now before we move on. Number one is it possible to use the data collected by ACC in service mapping? The ML service mapping, presumably.
Oh, this is a use case that is not supported yet. We support the data collection for the inventory and the related lists. And in just a few seconds, I will show you what it looks like on my demo instance.
Okay, thank you. Number two is the same information captured by ACC that the agentless ServiceNow discovery captures?
Pretty much. We do have some places where we collect actually more information, like the OS users, plus the software metering for specific applications. Licensed applications mostly is the use case. Aside from that, the agent does not execute patterns, so it will not get into the deep dive application discovery that you have with the probes and patterns from horizontal discovery.
Thank you. And one final one before we move on. Oh, it just disappeared from my screen. So let's just move on now. And then if when I find it again, I'll ask it later on.
Thank you.
So I think our next topic would be around the poll. We'd like to understand which use cases do you see ACC adding value to your organization so far? So we showed the slide earlier with the use cases. So push-based discovery, AI ops, monitoring or health log analytics there, IT service management for your servers and or your end user computing, for security operations, for software asset management, for hardware asset management, and finally governance and regulatory. Give it about 10 more seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and share those results. So in looking at the results here, the majority of you view push-based discovery as the primary use case, closely followed by IT service management or end user computing, and then software asset management, then hardware asset management, as well as AI ops. So thank you guys for your answers. We can proceed on to the next section, which is where Severin moves into the demo.
Thank you. So I have to share my screen, right?
Yes, you do.
There you go. Yes. Okay. Desktop 1. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So for those of you who are new to these sessions, you can revisit the recording from the first webinar we gave, back in summer, in June last year. And always have a look for new events. We are delighted to have you on the live sessions. So a link that you may want to have, and I don't know if I can, do I have access to the chat? If I can put it there. Can you all see what's in the chat? I have no clue. All right. Well, please visit this KB article. I attached some material, documentation material on, well, troubleshooting, but recommendations for architecture, as well as deep dive into TLS configuration, digital certificates and MTLS, FIPS, all of that stuff. So please have a look and send us feedback whenever you want. So closing that doc. Well, let's go first to my instance. That is here. I will log in just a second. I don't want to see my face here. On this instance, I do have quite a few agents running, some on VMware, some on AWS, on Azure, GCP, one on a Raspberry Pi, one on a Intel NUC. And so, well, just to get started, this is the usual dashboard for the agent that we provide out of the box. Although I just copied it over, and using the CMDB query builder, I added a few KPIs for me that are a few items that are very important when you deploy the agent at scale, where you want to make sure that you have the appropriate coverage for your systems. When you are on the cloud, you run cloud discovery, you will have a set of VM virtual machine instances records. And part of your goal is to have 100% coverage with an agent, maybe with horizontal discovery, doesn't matter, but to have that CI server in the CMDB and to have that relationship between the VM instance from cloud discovery and the CI server. So for that, in the CMDB query builder, if we have time, I can go back to that. You just select a VM instance record plus a computer record, create the relationship, and select the records where there is no relationship. I also did the other way around to see which systems that are identified as VMs with a virtual flag on, is virtual on, that do not have a relationship to a VM instance. And I say I have quite a few actually. So I will have to go back to that. And last thing I added just for myself, duplicate agents. When an agent is re-provisioned into the same system, I may have a duplicate record because the identification for that agent is the agent ID, which is stored in the cache directory of the agent. So if you wipe out everything, like you uninstall completely the agent and you reinstall it, you'll have a duplicate. So think about that. We do have a scheduled job. I think every 30 days, we clean up all of the agents that are down, and you can modify that if you want to. But still, have a look at that as part of your regular CMDB health activities. Any question, Steve, on high level on the agent?
One question that was kind of a follow-up from the first section is the JSON load from the client device to the mid server encrypted?
All end-to-end, so not end-to-end, let me rephrase it. Each segment between the agent and the mid, and between the mid and the instance, all of that is encrypted. Yes. By default.
Thanks, Severin.
By default, and in the doc, all about TLS. I mentioned how you can enable TLS 1.3 between the agent and the mid, how you can disable specific ciphers and algorithms, etc., etc. How you can play with load balancers, especially on cloud. You have, I mean, obviously on-prem as well, but many ways to configure a load balancer. So I'll give you some examples on how to make it happen.
Got it, thank you. And then one more question before you move on. Just can you explain the concept of duplicate agents one more time?
Sure. I have one here. The agent is identified using the agent ID. Agent ID, I don't show it here. I will likely show it on my list view, but it doesn't matter. Agent ID, that's the one here. That thing here is stored by the agent. It is generated by the agent and stored in the cache directory of the agent. This is what we have by default when you go to the CMDB CI, the CI class manager. That's what will be used for identification. Which means if you delete that file because you did some maintenance, you wanted to uninstall the agent and install a new one over there, you will have a new agent record. This is what I just did a couple of days ago on that system. And I have a Windows CI that is here. As we are here, we just present you quickly the attributes. You can see we collect the hardware asset information, operating system information, related lists, so all the serial numbers, storage devices, partitions, IP information, running processes, TCP connections, etc., software installations. But you see here, I do have two agents. One that is down because it did not connect back for a while, and it was replaced by the second one. Over time, this may accumulate, so you don't want to get that necessarily. It's not such a problem if you don't have any issue with your reporting, but keep that in mind. If you uninstall and reinstall the agent, that will create a duplicate. Are we good?
I believe so. If there's any further questions on that topic, we can cover that offline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, you see this one is marked as down. So automation, let's start with an easy one. Windows. I say easy one, I have no clue how easy it is, but let's reconnect here. I created a public repository. I was awarded with a notification from security at ServiceNow, but that's okay, we're all fine. I put the link here in the chat. Here, you go to scripts. There you go. No, sorry, that's one for Linux. This one, PS1. All right. Depending on how you roll out, those agents can be with a CCM, Tanium, part of a master image, etc. Many options are there, but I give you some simple steps with PowerShell, for example, to make it happen. So you want to assign the API key. Please see with your security group how you can handle that API key securely. Okay, do not try not to store it unencrypted at rest. Your target for the mid server or load balancer, obviously, version of the agent. And from here, as we run it, we download the agent from the install ServiceNow.com repository. My suggestion always is to do that step once so that you can go back to your infrastructure team for Linux and Windows, making sure that the MSI RPM dev file meets the security requirements from your company. You double check the signature that we sign with ServiceNow certificate, just to make sure that the integrity was not compromised. And then you embed that into your own solution. Just for the sake of these examples here, I did all of the procedures at once. Then I want to run my MSI exec, install the agent, and here I want to use the system account for that. And then it's the thing, if you deploy that on a regular system, no problem, the service will be started with automatic delayed, I think, that's how it's named on Windows services. But if you want to put that on a master image, well, you may have an issue with starting the agent, because that agent will start, generate a unique ID, as I mentioned before, that unique ID in the cache, but then every time you clone it, that ID will remain there. And so instead of having duplicate CIs, you will end up with mangling. So an agent will create multiple records on the host. One agent for multiple hosts, it is not good. So for that, you can easily, as you deploy the agent, not start the service as you deploy the agent, as you install it, switch the service to manual, You want to test it? Sure, you have the commands here, but then you have to clean them up, stop the service, and remove that agent ID from the cache directory. And the cache is under program data, not in program files. And then as you clone your VM, whenever you have a clone prep or first boot, whatever, just make sure that you turn back the agent service on and set it up to automatic. On my Windows here, on Azure, I have this shell. Let's see, yes, there we go. My list of commands. I just run that. I did that before. It takes a bit of time on Azure, so I will skip that. But this is how I spin up my agents on all of my systems on Azure, on Windows. As we are talking about that, I also wrote a very simple script to deploy OSquery. Very similar process. I force the configuration file, and from that will enable software metering for some use cases. So if you're looking on options to identify consumption of licensed software on end-user endpoints, you can use this mechanism to track that software usage. You spin up the agent, get OSquery running as a daemon, as documented, and then you go with your reclamation roles on ServiceNow instance that will then store the data into ServiceNow for software usage metering. If you want to see what it looks like, software usage over here, you should see something like this. And FYI, for some use case, that example, is it on the same system? No, it's not. Yeah, these ones here. On that Windows 11 Pro, on the same system, you can see multiple users. So it is per user, per product, and per configuration item that you will have that data collected. All right, we've seen what? Okay, whatever. I was there just a second ago. Yeah, do not sign out. Whatever. Okay, so you can use PowerShell for this, but in your Azure environment, very likely they have some other ways to maintain those packages. Maybe they use the extension, the custom script extension that comes with Azure. So you can use this easy mechanism to make it happen. 1240 for me. Let's go with Linux. I have posted a Ansible role on Linux. Ansible is a very nice solution that enforces idempotence. I think that's how we pronounce that thing. Meaning that it will enforce the state, the desired state of resources on the target systems. And if nothing has to be changed, it will not change anything. So it's very efficient. I do my best with the time I had to work on that, to set up the repository here with basic information. I use a vault, Ansible Vault, where I store that information encrypted. So my API key, even if it is encrypted as I want, it is never handled in clear text in my commands, in my repository, I mean. And to show you here, I do have my inventory, it's using Emacs, of course, set up with my resources. It was enabled, whatever, okay. I do have some Linux, CentOS, CentOS Stream, of course, RHEL, SUSE, Debian, Ubuntu. On some systems, they will use the URL to download the agent. On some others, they will use a local YUM repository. I don't have a satellite deployed there, but I spun up a small YUM repository for that. And in some others, I will just push the file from Ansible. Using sudo, I handle the sudo configuration. We'll get to that in a second. I do have some Mac as well. And I have an old piece on Windows that I haven't tested recently. So if you're looking for Windows in particular, there is another repository contribution on Ansible that I would recommend that is very thorough over here. I put the link in the chat. And so it's not from me, but one of our contributors posted all of this. How Ansible works? Well, it will take that inventory in command line. And what do we have? ACC Linux. I want to first deploy, execute that script on 10 systems in parallel, and then just do 50% of whatever is left, and you keep going. My encrypted file is here. And I will apply a role. This is the role that I posted on Git. Executing all of that together. Let's deploy it on quite a few systems. Here's some RHEL, CentOS, Linux, Amazon Linux, sorry, etc., etc. How many systems do we have up and running? Should be 23 here. All right, I run it. It will run all of these tasks. And just to go quick, it's recorded, so we can go back. It will first get the Ansible facts to understand the operating system and handle conditions based on that. Linux distribution. For some of them, I copy the package that I have on that little Bastion host. For most of my systems, I just skip that task. So I only did it for these two, I think. And you can see, okay, it was not changed, so actually nothing was done. But it keeps going with all the tasks. Nothing to do with MSI. Install the agent from OS repository that was on 2 systems. And another one from local source. So we did like a dpkg forcing the package on the local file system, and a few others downloading from the URL install.servicenow.com. It keeps going, and you see all of these tasks are happening in parallel, 10 at a time. Once we are done with that, let's configure the agent service. There are many things to do. In my example, I want to use a specific user, not the default one. So I will force my user. I create the user, set up access rights, create the parent directories, of course. At some point, I will create the sudoers file. I prefer normally using the drop-down directory, etc sudoers.d. That way, I will not, hopefully I will not impact or change whatever was there before. But maybe in your group, they all have everything into one single file. So this is why it is very important to keep communication lines open with your sysadmin groups, making sure that everything is done correctly. You may notice here it's showing changed. Why? That's because I'm changing the mode of a file. This is kind of my canary test. As we apply the access rights to the parent directories and subsequent files, the file is set to one mode, but right after that, I want a specific file to be in a read-only even for the owner of that file, so 0440. Every task that is marked as OK means nothing was changed, but you can see the sudo that was edited there. Once we're done with all of that, let's start the service if it wasn't set up there. We support services, agent services from systemd on Linux, on all distributions that we officially support. So sometimes you need to do a systemd reload or systemctl reload daemon. You may have noticed here, finally, the ACC configuration, acc.yaml. And we restarted the service. There we go. On most systems, I had just those changes on the access rights, except on SUSE Linux, because on SUSE Linux, this is where I let the API key non-encrypted. As you can see here, just put that flag there. In my config file, I will not share that, it's recorded. I have both values for with an API key encrypted and with the API key unencrypted. So this is just to show you the example. As you deploy your agent with the API key, what you don't want is to have that config file constantly updated every single time you run Ansible. You don't want that. So make sure that you stick to these principles of idempotence. Let's have a break here. I need some water. Any question on the chat?
Yeah, Severin, thank you. This is awesome. Quick question. Do you have a version of this for Windows? Do you have an Ansible link on GitHub for Windows?
So I did publish something a long time ago from a faraway galaxy, which is likely not working anymore. And honestly, I gave up on that after a few minutes, ending with WinRM on Windows. But I sent another link from one of our contributors, and he was able to get very good achievement on deploying that using Windows. So I highly recommend you to, and he even documented the steps. That's very kind of him. So yes, he did a lot here to make it happen on Windows. Yes, all of his gotchas. Yes. I remember I had to do that stuff. Bah. Okay. Anyways, so thanks to him for all of his work, his dedication to get Ansible working on Windows.
So that's part of the link that you had sent me earlier today, right? So we're going to be posting all these links into the chat section in the coming minutes here, just as a recap for everybody.
I thought I put it in the chat already, but maybe...
That's okay. We're going to recap everything towards the end
here.
Secondarily, is there so question was, Thomas found a document about installing ACC and air-gapped networks on your share, but is there any documentation on our doc site for setting this up?
All right. So we do have this solution where all of the scripts that we use to execute, to extract data can be executed, put it at once into a single file, and then have a manual upload into ServiceNow. This is great. It works very well for a small set of systems, but it is quite heavy on the maintenance. If your groups who do operate those air-gapped networks do not have the automation in place, or even the knowledge on how they operate on the systems. So we cannot here just guess how things are done. If your security officers use a USB stick, do they use a KVM? We still have this nowadays, keyboard, VGA, mouse. Do they connect to each system individually? Do they have a jump host? These are all the questions you need to address in order to get the air-gapped solution working at scale. I'm very happy to take that offline. we can clearly share with you the basic steps to get things done manually, but please understand that the level of effort to make it happen for real in your environment clearly requires collaboration from your security officers and the people who operate those networks.
All right, thank you, Severin. Another question is, can you explain how we can update publicly facing agents for computers that are off-site? So is that like, for example, is that using a publicly facing internet mid server? So what is the process to update the agents for that are off-site?
Oh yes. So generally speaking, for regular updates, let's say in your normal IT environment, how you pushed the package, you used this kind of tools, SCCM, Tanium, BigFix, etc. My recommendation is stick to that for the upgrade. If you are, and by the way, the upgrade, you just do a simple MSI exec/I with the package name, and that will proceed with the upgrade. You do not need, even on Windows, you do not need to uninstall and reinstall the agent just to handle an upgrade. But now we do have some situations where for sure you do not have any way to access the device remotely. You have a situation sometimes for IoT, or in some places where you really need someone physically to go to every single office, every single sales point to run some procedure. So you can have a selective self-upgrade that we support with the agent. Getting into that here. What's happening with my mouse? Okay, 7 minutes left. Where if I pick up an old one here, ODC, very nice. Okay. You can upgrade the agent from there, but there's a gotcha. On Windows, you have something called UAC, User Access Controls. Whenever you try to upgrade or even install a regular MSI, you run that as a non-administrator user, you will see that pop-up window asking you for admin credentials. That doesn't go well for self-service capability. So the only way we can support that agent upgrade, selective self-upgrade capability, is to run the agent as system account, the local system account, which we support. Just make sure that you put the right parameters as part of your installation to run the agent configured that way. So in the documentation, in the release notes, on the store app, I documented here all of the flags for the MSI. So go back to that, use system, and from there you can trigger the self-upgrade capability. Any other question?
One more question before we wrap up here. Can you please explain how we can use custom script extension in Azure for installing ACC clients?
Custom script extension in Azure. Well, this is what I covered before. You will check with your team who handles the storage for that to push that script, and then you associate your VM to that. It's called an extension, not an application. Should be something else. But yeah, you will check with your team who operates the Azure environment to make it happen. And by the way, this kind of scripts, I also uploaded one on that repository here for Linux that you can embed in a SoundCloud prep. I missed whatever. that you can in your Cloud Init scripts. So same thing, you can assign all the information you want, API key, hopefully security will not reach out to me. And it's not the right one. You can try, but it's not going to work. Where here I handle sudo and all of the other information you need, all the config files that I store there, systemd with some additional content to make sure that the agent resources will never go beyond what I expect from a third-party agent on my infrastructure. The ACC YAML, the allow list, and we should have sudo rows here. You can see the list of commands with sudo. It's very small. It's 2 commands. That's it for a basic use case.
All right. Well, thank you, Severin. I'm going to take the screen back here and wrap up our meeting for today. So thank you, Severin, very much for presenting. Thank you all for your questions. Really insightful. What we have for you here, and there'll be a link in the chat, is so in addition to this webinar, there are lots of additional resources for ACC. So we're going to put those links in our chat right now. And please feel free to access these at your convenience and of course leverage them. So the innovation that you see in ServiceNow products is largely driven by customer needs, by you, right? So we encourage you to submit your ideas on our idea portal. So go to support.servicenow.com/ideas to submit your idea or upvote an existing one. So once an idea receives 10 upvotes from at least 10 unique customers, not 10 people within your account, but 10 unique customers, it's automatically raised to the attention of our product team for consideration. So for our call to action today, we highly encourage everyone here to visit store.servicenow.com to download the ACC applications, to try out ACC in sub-production, to showcase the value that you've done in sub-production to your stakeholders and get them excited. And of course, we are here for you, so feel free to ask questions to ServiceNow SMEs. Use the community as a resource, reach out to your account team, or leave us your contact information in the survey at the end of this webinar. And then finally, of course, share your success story with us. We'd love to hear how you're doing and make you a public success story if you're willing to share. Now be sure to join us for our next webinar on February 21st, where we're going to cover how to gain visibility to cloud-native technologies. You can register the link in the chat. And beginning in February, my colleague John, who is on this call today, will be taking over the host role for this webinar series. So John joined us back in September, and we'll be working together, John and I, on ITOM Visibility and Governance this year. John, can you please give yourself an introduction here?
Sure, thank you, Steve. So hi, everyone. My name is Gian Mario De Luigi, and as Steve was saying, I'm an outbound product manager for ITOM Visibility and Governance here at ServiceNow. And again, I joined in September 2022. So I'm very, very excited to be your host for our next webinar, and I'm really looking forward to see you all there.
All right, thank you, John. And of course, I have thoroughly enjoyed leading these webinars, with my product management colleagues, and helping you better understand how to use our solutions. So thank you for your continued attendance and as well as your interaction. But rest assured, you'll be in great hands with John. So ACC is included with ITOM Visibility, which is a suite of products that enable you to gain visibility of your entire estate. So to learn more about Agent Client Collector and how ITOM Visibility can help your organization, please reach out to your ServiceNow account team. Thank you for attending today, and have a great rest of your day.